Hey, welcome back to Rebel Movement Podcast. My name is Billy. My pronouns are they, them, or she, her, and I'm glad you're here. I have a interview for you again today, and I'm really excited. I'm always excited to share these with you. I really love these conversations, and it feels um I feel like I say this all the time. It just feels so fun. So I'll let you get to that, but I'll just give you a little brief reminder that this is the last couple of days to grab the sale on through for newsletter subscribers and on my Etsy. Both will be linked in the show notes. Newsletter subscribers get 40% off their next purchase, and you can get anybody can get 25% off the Etsy store. Check the link in the show notes. Thank you for all of you who have been listening to my podcast and who've been supporting me the last 4 years of me being in a business. I don't remember how long I've had the podcast. It's not 4 years, though. I think it might be a little bit less. I should check it. Anyway, thank you, everybody, for your support. I think you all know that being a small business is like, it's a lot. It's quite challenging. I've learned a lot. I've grown a lot as a business owner and as a person through doing this. And I really am passionate about the work that I do. And I'm really excited to see the directions it's going in. And I wouldn't be here without all of you supporting me. So I would love it if you could help me out, make it to 5 years and tip me, purchase from me, send my stuff to your friends, buy merch, do all that stuff. It makes a huge difference in my life and this business, and it helps me grow my business, helps me do more of the anti-diet work and the social justice work that I do, and it helps me help other people. Thanks so much. Let you get to the interview or to the conversation. I hope you enjoy it as much as I do.
Okay.
Hey, thanks so much for being here. I really appreciate that you're taking the time to chat with me. Do you mind telling us your name, your pronouns, and then a little bit about you?
Yeah, so I'm Agni Hogaboom, and I live and work here on the lands of the Chehalis, Chinook, Shoalwater, and Quinault peoples, also known as Grays Harbor, Washington, USA, which is like right on the coast of Washington State. I'm mostly known for being a vegan designer. I make couture and workwear in a near zero waste studio. And so I make clothing one at a time, like high dollar, high investment pieces. But I'm also a Jain yoga scholar practitioner. I'm enrolled in the Masters of Engaged Jain Studies program with Claremont Theological School and Arihanta Institute. And yeah, most people in my regular life know me as a clothing producer and an artist, but I'm also a huge B movie fan. You can probably see my little creature from the Black Lagoon
Oh,
poster.
yeah.
Yes, non-binary icon, the creature from the Black Lagoon. And
Yeah.
yeah, we just yesterday became empty nesters. So my partner and I have been together almost 27 years, and our youngest just moved out. So lots of amazing work. I'm very fortunate and happy to do all the different kinds of work that I do. And I've been really excited for this conversation.
Yeah, I'm really excited for this conversation too. I know we talked about this a little bit before, but that must be it's like such a big transition to go to empty nester, right?
Yeah, I mean, like I was in physical shock on Saturday after we moved the youngest out. Like I could feel my body in shock. We also homeschooled, so that's like a whole different amount of time that I had with my children for 20 years. But it's already for those of your listeners who have had their child move out, instantly the workload of the house goes down. Like there's like so much less laundry and cleaning. So there are benefits because it's nice to have such a tidy, quiet home. But yeah,
Mhm.
my heart is literally broken as we talk, missing my daughter
Yeah.
and my son. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I bet. Yeah, that's such a big transition. I love that all the different projects you have. Projects, I don't know if projects is the
Yeah,
right
no, it's
word.
fine. Yeah, that works.
Um, they're all like such cool things. I've never heard of Jane yoga, actually.
Yeah, it's really wild how few people have heard of Jainism. Just briefly, it's one of the three major Dharma traditions or philosophies, along with Buddhism and Hinduism, and
Cool.
everybody has heard of those. If you've heard of Jains, you probably kind of heard some of these little bits of ephemeral knowledge, like Jains are hardcore vegetarians. They wear masks over their mouths so that they don't inhale microorganisms. So you might have heard some kind of strange things, or like Jains don't eat onions and potatoes. Like there might be some of those things you've heard, but now that anyone who's listening, you'll start to hear the word Jane more now that you've heard me say it. But for me, I'm just so privileged to be studying exactly what I want to study, and Jane yoga is a field with lots of books and academia and all those things. So I'm just thrilled. And I'm also in like a Sanskrit class, which is the hardest class I've ever taken in my life. And I want
I
to point
bet.
out I have a degree in chemical engineering. Like I have a good brain, but this
Mhm.
Sanskrit class is kicking my ass. It's amazing.
Yeah. I've only done a bit of Sanskrit, and it was a while ago. But the person who was my teacher had studied it for years,
Yeah,
and they felt like they knew like a barely a
that's
drop in
right.
the bucket. And the person who they learned from had studied for like twice as long as them, and they also felt like a little bit of that kind of thing. That it's like a lot to learn.
Yeah, I mean, it's considered one of the hardest languages to learn. It's amazing. And I would say like for anyone who has any interest, when you hear like that you study it for years before you have any true competencies, don't let that scare you because I will say I'm in my week 4 and it's been truly amazing and has actually affected my life in a multitude of ways. So don't be
Cool.
scared. I would say
Yeah, I
try
don't
to
mean to
find a
scare
good,
anybody.
yeah. Well, but people do get scared when they hear that. And I would say be careful who you find for an instructor because there is a history of abuse in specifically in Sanskrit studies and in any kind of study that's highly formalized, there can be abusive elements and all of that. So just be careful. But if you find the right instructor, I'm really lucky to have the right professor. You're going to love it.
Awesome. Thank you. Um, I know that we're talking. I feel like today's subject I want to say a big subject. Not that I'm thinking about that, and I don't know if I've ever had started a conversation with someone and not felt like there could be multiple episodes about the particular topic. Um, but I know that you wanted to talk about resisting gentrification through a yoga project.
Mhm.
Um, I am just going to say for anybody listening, this is not my area of expertise. I mean, I know some, and I'm definitely obviously going to participate in the conversation. But just in case you're like, I don't know what that means, I mean, I'm a little bit ahead of that because obviously we planned this. But, we're there together. If you, what feels like a good place for you to start off with this?
I guess I did want to just give a definition of gentrification and a couple
Perfect.
salient points. And then once we start talking about yoga, I think you will find that you have a lot of expertise, Billy,
Probably.
immediately. So a lot of times we think about gentrification, we think of the hipster coffee shop, the hipster,
Mm,
what am I seeing all the memes? I think it's about a burger like in a beer place. Like there's a bunch of memes about that. Like you're gonna get
mm,
this burger that's like really expensive but not any good. So we kind of have this like snarky idea of gentrification, or most people do. Some people know a lot more about it, and some of your listeners know more than I do. But I'm just gonna read a definition that I found and that I think is relevant to our conversation. So gentrification is a process of neighborhood change that includes economic change in a historically disinvested neighborhood by means of real estate investment and new higher income residents moving in, as well as demographic change, not only in terms of income level, but also in terms of changes in the education level or racial makeup of residents. So, I would say, in like layman's terms, that gentrification is about the housing and who owns what, and of how mixed a neighborhood is in terms of race and socioeconomic strata. So
mhm.
we kind of recognize gentrification after it's happened. And I'm in a community that it's starting to happen to. And I'm very concerned that people aren't realizing that it's happening. And so that's why my interest level is like really high on this topic.
For sure. Is there what made you realize that the area you're in is
Oh my
in the
gosh.
starting process?
One thing was population. So I am fourth generation here in Grace Harbor, and we've had a population flatline for many, many years. And all of a sudden, a lot of people are moving here, and I suspect our census will literally show that, but anecdotally, I can see that. And what's interesting is a lot of them are early climate refugees, and they don't know it. So I had someone from
Hmm.
Arizona tell me, Well, we moved here post-COVID, and this is kind of crazy, but we moved because it was so hot in Arizona. And I'm like, that's not crazy. Like that is what's going to happen is refugees going from the hotter areas of the United States to places like mine, which is it's like a paradise here weather-wise. So part of it was that. And oh my gosh, another part is just how many local residents are complaining about the cost of specifically housing, short term and long term, and groceries. So
Mhm.
I've seen in real time these residents almost panicking in Facebook groups about the cost of living going up. Also, the other thing that will tell you if your neighborhood is gentrifying is if houselessness goes up.
Mhm.
100% that is about housing costs. There's other factors, but it is really about housing costs. And so this is well outside of both of our expertise, but really when you're fighting gentrification, you have to look at investment activity policies, public ownership of land, like kind of these big, complex problems. But luckily, even if you're not wrestling with that, there's a lot you can do with your yoga mission and your yoga projects. There's a lot you can do. But I will say policy is very important. You have to look at who is on your city council, consider
Mm,
running for city council. Like I highly like when you're on the council, you can affect zoning and housing costs a lot more than just a vote, right? Than just being a voting person.
for sure. Well, that's very
So
interesting.
yeah,
That's a
kind
good
of a
point.
mouthful there, but those are what made me realize it's happening here.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you for explaining that. I'm pretty new in the area that I'm in. My partner's family has been here for I can't remember how many generations, but at least a few. And I think that this area might also be um gentrified. Is that how you say it?
Yeah, or gentrifying. Yeah.
Gentrifying.
Is it? I
Um,
mean, do you feel like it's already happened or that it's happening?
I don't know if it's happened and done, but I think in COVID, a lot of when people were starting to work online, this area is like, it's basically an island, technically, but it's a pretty big one. And it's kind of country, um, lots of farmland, there's some really nice beaches. And a lot of folks moved from Toronto to here because they could work online or whatever. They're like getting out of the big city. And um, I mean, I don't know that I've necessarily been here long enough or know the area well enough to say for sure, but everything I've heard from people who are local or who are have been local
Right.
seems like it might also be gentrifying as well.
There's a word for that, basically long-term residents, right? Because you are
Mm,
local to wherever you
mhm.
live.
True.
um,
Yeah, I am. Yeah,
but
long-term
yeah,
residents. That's
you
true.
got to pay a lot of attention to what long-standing residents have to say. You can't
Yeah.
poo-poo what they have to say. And I will say, this is also a semi-rural community that I live in, and we have like the second highest unemployment number
Mm,
in the state. And so to have people who have the type of job where they can work remote and they have the assets where they can move, and they're able-bodied and they have savings or they have a stable job, and then they come here and they're like, look at these like rundown yokels, we're going to show them culture. Like so like
mm,
the attitudes of gentrifiers is also something you'll see. Like my partner was talking to someone who'd recently moved here, and and the guy said, "Well, Aberdeen, they'll take anything they can get." So, the guy's been living here for 2 years and he's already decided that everybody who's lived here a long time is kind of this knuckle dragging rube. So you'll see
mm.
those attitudes when people move to an area. So I would say be careful if you do move, look around for local wisdom. It's there for sure. Like one more snarky example, we had people move here that started a CSA, like a agricultural, growing food. And on their Facebook page, they often talk about how they brought vegetables that no one here sort of knew how to grow and eat vegetables until they showed up. And of course, like that's not true. Like long-term residents, we've always known, we've had lots of wisdoms, and so it's really important if you move to an area to look for those wisdoms. You might not see them right away. They can be hard to find, but they're there.
Mhm, mhm.
That's my last little soapbox about that because I find that stuff really irritating.
Yeah, absolutely. I really appreciate all of that as well. I mean, as someone, I guess this is on topic, but like not specifically on topic, but I find it confusing as someone who just moved here. And I like, for like full disclosure, don't have tons of time. I would love to be more involved in the community and like to like this community that I'm in, not just online. Um, but I've had a hard time. Most people that I've met have been people who've moved, like just moved here the last like 3 to 5 years.
Hmm.
I have met some other folks, so I'm not saying that's the only people I've met, but um, it's confusing at first glance. I mean, I do obviously have connections, like my partner's family now can say like, oh, this is the farm stand that's like, the best one in town or whatever, which is
Right.
helpful. But I could see how if someone's just moving and um, they're wanting to know that like actual local, historically local information, it would be really hard to find sometimes.
Oh, it is. And like locals aren't always that welcoming and that helpful. And locals often don't realize that what's easy for them to know is really totally opaque to newcomers. Because I'll meet people who've been here for 3 years and they still don't know about a local asset that is like right in front of my face and that I
Hmm.
know about. So locals and newcomers both need to have humility and curiosity towards one another. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah,
But
for
locals
sure.
locals have a responsibility here for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. So when we're talking about resisting gentrification for yoga, I
Oh,
guess first of all, what gave you the idea to, um, I don't know, talk about this?
oh my gosh. So I launched my yoga space February 2024. So just what is that, 7 months ago or something?
Hmm.
6 months ago. Um, I built a sliding scale membership and I also built some no cost yoga. And I'm really proud of my project. It's called Little Switch Yoga. I call it a space, not a studio, for reasons we may or may not get to today. I thought that the sliding scale, because I'm the first public sliding scale business around here, or at least the only one I know of.
Mm.
By that, I mean that my sliding scale is public knowledge that anyone can see. A lot of entrepreneurs have sort of secret sliding scales where they don't tell you, but there is one. But
Hmm.
mine's public. And I have been shocked at how hard it has been for people to understand, like, and to take responsibility for finding their appropriate number. And that gave me a clue. And that at first I thought that was about capitalism. Like, oh, if I say that I have a yoga class and you can come for either 0, 10, or $20, and you pick your number, it's none of my business. You take responsibility. You look at the green bottle theory graphic. You've probably seen that, Billy, the green bottle. I'll share it to you in the show notes. Well, what has ended up happening is that some of the residents who are very much capable of financially supporting the project, they'll take the lowest number that they can, right? And then some of the residents who cannot really attend yoga without financial hardship and who therefore really should take the zero, right? They should come in at a full scholarship. They still don't feel emboldened enough to do it, right? And so I have learned that to truly practice like pricing equity, you need to do more than just have an inclusive model with lots of price points. You need to do a lot more. And one thing you need to do is to know that you're going to have to go to communities. It's not enough to just have a $0 number because there are people who are just not going to be able or willing to step across the threshold. They're just not feeling like they truly belong, or maybe they just can't get there. So you have to go to other places, which for the space or the studio owner is a lot of work. So it's a lot of work to run an equitable yoga business. It's a lot of work. The other aspect that I was really surprised by and that probably led me to think of gentrification specifically in America, and I'm going to speak very plainly, and I would love to hear your perspective. In America, yoga has been co opted into sort of an athletic and socioeconomic elite. So, thin white women are dominating yoga spaces, not everywhere in America, but in many places. And sometimes those types of people don't want to mix with other types of people. And so once you have a sliding scale business, you might be surprised to find that you've choked off some of that money that you would have easily made if you just decided to make a white lady yoga studio. So if I would have cosplayed as a white lady and wore the right leggings and like had the right marketing, I would have made a lot more money right away, because not only would I look that part, but I would be signaling to those people that don't worry, you'll be mixing with your types of people. And so
Mm-hmm.
I'm running an integrated yoga space, and it has been hard on both ends, like hard to get people to come and hard to get people who can afford to actually pay.
Yeah,
So that's about
thousand
as
percent.
briefly as I could say that, but it's been a real eye opener.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you. I mean, you can go into as much detail as you want. No need to be brief at all. I fully agree with everything you just said. I don't think I remembered my memory for names of things is not always 100%, but I just quickly looked while you were talking. Green bottle theory, yes, I've definitely heard of it. I have adapted like my own adaptation of it that I have also
Mhm.
on the website in several different places. I post it and I share it with a lot of different things. I found it like interestingly, I found a similar thing to what you said, that people either would, if I gave a sliding scale of like, I don't know, $0 to $50 as a random example, or say $5 to $50. Um, Oftentimes, like you said, people who don't necessarily um I don't know, wouldn't necessarily fit the criteria of the lower sliding scale, if you're looking to use the green bottle theory, would ask for the lowest
Mhm.
or freebie stuff. And then people who don't necessarily or who do need it would have a hard time asking for it. And I mean, as someone who's been within I wouldn't say I've been to the full bottle version, but who's needed the sliding scale, I've also had a hard time with people like giving the lowest number, even if it was the one I needed, because I felt guilty. Like I was like, for some reason, even though they set the sliding scale, it felt like I was undermining or like undermining their credibility or under like I wasn't giving them their value or like it felt difficult um for a lot of ways to for a lot of reasons to ask for it, like ask for that
It,
amount.
it is difficult, and it to a point it's good for someone to struggle with that, but at a certain point we need to let them off the hook a bit.
Yeah.
And I have also availed myself of a lower tier for tuition for a couple of things I've done, including one of my yoga schools. And their documentation, they sort of started at like a 90% scholarship, and they went all the way down to something very low, like 15, like to where you were only paying 15%.
Mm. Mhm.
And you had to read, like you had to read through all of it. And I remember at the time, I thought, this is wonderful, because I'm really thinking, I'm really thinking. It's not, can I pay the least that I can get away with to
Yeah.
save some money? It's like, what can I actually, like, it'll be a bit of a struggle, but I can do it. And I
Mhm.
picked that number, and I will tell you that is a really high value experience for me. I valued the school. I showed up. I was a good student because I wasn't just grifting something for free. Like I had to sacrifice a bit. So everyone's number, it's not about the number, it's about putting that
Yeah,
work in, right?
for
And
sure.
similarly with my instructors, so I have two other instructors now at Little Switch, and I asked them to tell me their terms, and they are so uncomfortable. But I want them to go through that struggle. I
Yeah.
want them to pick that number. And so this is a good struggle for people to have. But I will say that people are there's so many sinister ways that capitalism hurts us, and one of it is like some people will resent you for that. They'll resent you for having a sliding scale, which was a
Yeah.
shock to me. I got a letter that was like a 2-page email from a woman all over the map criticizing my sliding scale, because I suspect, having talked to her, well, it doesn't matter what I suspect, but she really wanted to tell me, she wanted to tell me why my sliding scale was a bad idea. And it was kind of a long email, so I asked if she could meet me in person. And when we talked, she started kind of giving me advice about how you need to charge like a proper amount and you need to like make money for an entrepreneur. And she said, "Well, I just think you need to know this as a beginning, as a new entrepreneur." And I said, "I'm not a new entrepreneur. I've been an entrepreneur since 2016. And I've learned how to make, like for my design work, that's a $550 pair of custom jeans. When you charge a lot, what people perceive as a lot of money, they actually treat you with more respect, which sucks. Like I've never had a problematic client for my higher price point services and products. But when I started charging for a lower price point item, which is a yoga class, right? So it's not, I mean, $20 is still a lot to some people, but it's a much lower price point than a $550 pair of jeans.
Mhm.
That's where I started seeing these sort of weird issues of entitlement and disrespect. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, that is very interesting. That's a very interesting thing to say or to hear. I I don't know where to start with my thoughts. What you were saying before about like base that about I can't remember the way that you phrased it, but basically building an equitable business um is a little bit takes a little bit more time. It's a struggle for sure um to be able to make men's meet, but also still get those people in the door. I just wanted to circle back on that because I forgot to answer you with that part that it is. I can't remember who I was having a conversation with. I think it was a friend of mine. I wish I could remember who it was because it was very nice. I remember it was a voice message. If you're the person who sent me this message and you're like, that was me, send me a message so I can give you credit. But um, I was talking about near the first or second year I've been a bit, in business since 2020. And I was feeling that in the very first couple of years because I was a new business owner. And so imposter syndrome, I mean, it's always is there, but I found particularly the first couple of years was a big issue or it came up a lot. Um, and then also dealing with the like trying to be an equitable business and more of a sustainable business, not just in that it's sustainable for me, but it's also, I guess, more focused in social justice work. Like you said, if I marketed to like thin white ladies, because it is very similar, if not the same, here in Canada. I can't speak to everywhere in Canada, but from everything I've seen, it's very similar here. If I wanted to market to that, it would be a lot easier in some ways. Not that I want that. I would much rather choose the difficult route, but it's, I don't know, just worth mentioning, I guess, just in case anyone listening is starting a business or if they're finding that happen that they're starting a business and they really care about like sliding scale pricing or pricing in a way that feels more um, accessible and or usually ends up being both, but and or very vocal about social justice issues. Like for me, it's not just like in quotes, the thin white lady yoga, it's like anti-diet, specifically yoga. Um, Imposter syndrome can get in the way a little bit. And sometimes that like capitalist voice can, I feel like can be added into there. Like, oh, if you just did this thing, like that person you were just talking about, who's like, oh, this is like, I'm going to give you advice. It's this, just because your business doesn't look like their business or
Yeah.
your values don't look like their values. It doesn't mean that you're doing anything wrong. It is a bit of it's like a bit of muck to sift through because if you're doing both, if you're feeling both of those at the same time or experiencing both, it can feel a little bit like mixed in. Um, but anyway, I feel like I got on a little rant, but I just feel I wanted to underline that part.
Absolutely. And what I've also learned on that point is education takes time.
Mhm.
So when you do all this work, like if anyone's listening who is an entrepreneur and you ever just need someone and you just want to bitch and complain, I will hear you out because Entrepreneurs, we put something together. We build the website ourselves. We make the logo ourselves. We go get our training. We go buy our props or rent our props or beg and borrow, steal our props, whatever. We rent the place. We put the curtains up. We painstakingly make a class. We put out surveys. Like this is 1/3 of the things I had to do before February when I launched.
Mhm.
And then you launch it, and then someone is like, "Ah, why don't you have something on Tuesdays? I can't make it any other day." And you're like, oh my God, absolutely no acknowledgement for how much work it takes. So
Mhm.
entrepreneurs, they take this tremendous workload on. And one of the worst parts of capitalism is that people get very entitled and they want to put your work in a very, what is the word for it? Commodity. They want to make your work a commodity. So,
Mhm.
Billy, I can get yoga at the Y for $20. I'm not going to go to your $22 class. Instead of, Billy, I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad we have several different yoga options and that you're one of them. How can I support your mission? Like,
Mhm.
that's not how people approach entrepreneurs. And what's really sad is that people want to have more choices than just the YMCA and Amazon and Walmart, but yet
Yeah.
they don't meaningfully support small businesses. And you don't have to spend $1 to support a small business. If you do not have the money, that's fine. Because I could tell you 10 really helpful ways you could support a small business or a project
Mhm.
without spending a dime, and people won't do it. They'll be very sad if you close, and then they'll kind of wail and gnash their teeth. So, entrepreneurs out there, you're in a really tough spot because capitalism has made people incredibly passive and incredibly entitled. And that sounds really, really harsh, but I'm just speaking quite plainly. It doesn't mean they're bad people. And so,
Mhm.
education takes time. And so, I think one of the best things you can do if you set up an entrepreneurship is make sure you can be there very consistently for at least a year. So, if that means one class a month, it would be better to do that than to try to do 6 classes a week and then start doing things like canceling and shifting and moving around. So,
Mhm.
in my tagline for Little Switch Yoga is a clean, reliable electric yoga space. Reliability is really important. So, if you're an entrepreneur, it'd be better to start on a micro scale, like
Mhm.
one class a month, and do it really consistently at a really high standard. Because once you start being like, oh, class wasn't here today, I canceled, I showed up late, oh, we had to cancel Tuesday classes, you've lost a lot of your reputation and you don't know it. So entrepreneurs have to work so much harder than customers. But that having said, I'm a I have met my like membership and profit goal within 1 month of launch. That is
Oh,
almost
that's good.
unheard of. Yeah. So
Mhm.
these skills are learnable. I used to teach a course to ethical entrepreneurs. I did the last course last year, but it's learnable. It just like
Mhm.
you learned your yoga, you can learn business skills, but be very careful because a lot of business schools and business programs are very, very pro-capitalism. So you got to find a
Yeah.
post-capitalist. You really do, because they don't care about ethics. They're good at saying words that sound ethical, but that doesn't mean they have those practices, right?
Yeah, 100%. And I think a lot of them can even not even necessarily schools as in, I mean, you might not mean this, but as in universities and stuff like that, but even like if you look online on, for example, like marketing, you can find like 3,000 different
That's right.
approaches or different experts, which I'm sure there are lots of experts who tell you to do one thing. And as an early entrepreneur, it can feel really tempting to take that advice because you're like, well, I don't know anything about marketing. Maybe I should do this. And um, even if it sits a little bit um, off, because a lot of them, I mean, I don't know that I know the proper terminology, but I would say they're probably all, I'm assuming, capitalist style entrepreneurs who are preying on weaknesses and wanting to pick out or push on pain spots and things that might feel, if you are a person who's wanting to be an ethical entrepreneur, it might feel pretty icky and go
Yeah.
against values. And it can be like, if you're not new at it, it can be really confusing to try to figure that out. Which I guess also, I mean, like we were saying at the beginning, I don't know that I'm an expert on gentrification, but I would take a wild guess that in some of the like the gentrifying, um I'm gonna reword the sentence. Some of those approaches, the like very capitalist approaches, the shaming marketing or example or pricing it with a um, very specific higher price points. I'm assuming they all exist within gentrification. Did I word that in a way that made any
You
sense?
did. Yeah.
Okay.
I guess what I would say is I want to make a distinction between those of us who have to survive capitalism and we are
Hmm.
living in a capitalist society and country versus someone who truly prescribes to, whether they know it or not, a belief in that way of seeing the world. And
Hmm.
so you'll right now the yoga world is full of people who are very good at looking anti-capitalist. They even use that language. They are really careful to make sure to pick collaborators who have certain looks and identities, cultural and racial identities. And oh, I've got made sure to get that, instructor who's also disabled. They kind of like a buffet. They kind of pick out this very palatable, beautiful, supposedly inclusive looking program. And let's say it's a $2,000 yoga school or a 5,000 or 500. And what you need to look for is quality of contact. If these people do not talk to you one-on-one, like if you go through a yoga school and there's literally no one-on-ones, there's tons of pre-recorded content and there's Q&A sessions with like tons of people and they don't really grade your assignments. They kind of say they do, but they don't. You are looking at a revenue mill. They are trying to
Mm.
build something that and the other thing is look at who they collaborate with. I will collaborate with someone with 12 followers if their content and the quality of their mind and the quality of their work is high. I
Hmm.
don't look at their follower content at all. I have way too many times gotten in bed with, so to speak, someone who had a commercially successful looking or appearance, but when it came down to it, their values, their ethics were nothing. They were literally looking for a piece of the pie. Now I'm pretty good at identifying that now, mostly through trial and error, mostly error. I've given a lot of money to people who are grifters, really. I know it's really strong language, but again, when it comes to gentrification and climate refuge and that kind of a thing, it's time to be speaking quite plainly. So
Hmm.
you would rather collaborate with someone. The thing I look for first is reliability, and second is ethics. And I don't care about almost anything else, to be honest. I don't care if they've got 12 followers. I don't care if they are super polished in their message. I don't care if they have misspellings in their webpage. I don't care if they haven't been in Yoga Journal or in magazines. I care about their reliability and their ethics. And every time I've partnered with people like that, it has benefited me and my projects immensely.
Hmm. Hmm.
And not enough people are doing that. They're very carefully kind of saying, "Oh, look, this person has this book deal, or this person was in Yoga Journal," and they're like really quickly trying to make those relationships, and that is just, essentially pro-capitalist behavior. It's all about how can I squeeze profit? How can I get clout? Those kinds of things.
Yeah.
So the good news is you can stop worrying about that. You might as well just stop. And I don't mean you, Billy. I just mean in
No,
general.
I
I've
know. Yeah.
survived this long and I've kept food on my table and with what I do. You can bet on your ethics. You can trust your gut. If you talked about how something doesn't feel right sometimes. I had a marketing contract with someone. I was like, oh, the value isn't feeling great, and I realized this person was really just trying to develop one of those churns, like an evergreen cycle of content. And so
Hmm.
it was a low value experience. Whereas
Hmm.
like a half hour talking to the right person who's willing to meet with you at no cost, or maybe they charge $200 an hour, but if it's the right person, that half hour benefits you so much. So please look for ethics like that. Well, that's what I'm studying, right? I mean, like and I've become an ethics, no, I wouldn't say expert, but like I'm getting there. And it's the wonderful thing about ethics is as you deepen your ethical practice, things just get more vibrant. They don't get harder, they get easier, which is something I don't think Americans really believe. They think that
Hmm.
if you have ethics, it makes your life harder. And in some ways it does, but I will say the benefits outweigh the cons for sure.
Yeah. how do you look for ethics in someone to
That's
collaborate with?
such a good question. I try to poke around. Well, I met you and it was a few words that you said. So I happened to meet you because we were in a group together. I then poke around their socials a bit. I then approach them. Well, you got to be real careful with approaching. It's better for people to approach you than for you to approach them. I learned that the hard way in about 2022, I think, through my clothing projects. Like I would reach out and I learned it's better for someone to reach out to me.
Mm.
So I would say work on your own ethics and talk about them a lot. And the group that you and I were in, that was something that the group leader said,
Mm-hmm.
talk about your values, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I will say there's a lot of people that talk about values, but there's nothing substantive behind it.
Yeah,
So that you've asked a really good question that I don't have a great answer
that's
for.
okay. I just thought it was a
Don't look
good.
for scale. Look for someone who's doing one thing
Mm.
really well. Don't look for someone who's looks real charismatic on the outside.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think that. Yeah, I love that answer. Thank you. Um, it's one of the things I thought about a lot. Is my I'll just say that within my history, I've witnessed a lot of folks who do a lot of talking in terms of certain values, but not a lot of like um, following following the talk with action. And um, I thought for a long time about how to talk about my values without it being another case of someone just talking the talk. Um, and I didn't have this answer when I asked you this question, by the way. Your answer inspired this. Um, just to be just to be super clear. But one of the things that brought to mind was that if you're let's see, if someone is there's certain values of like they say they're inclusive, which I think is sometimes I think I wish the actual word itself is wonderful, but it's now been taken to be a word that doesn't really have any meaning behind it. Um, that's a buzzword, I guess is the word I'm looking for. If someone is saying they're inclusive and they say they're doing anti-oppression work, but they never never actually like talk about events going on. They don't talk about like the genocide happening. They don't they use like gendered language. They only ever post one body. And I will say, if you're a solo entrepreneur and you're mainly only posting your own body, it's slightly different than if you're always using like stock photos of
Mm-hmm.
the same type of body. Um, I feel like, I mean, maybe it takes a little bit of time. Um, but then also sometimes they have all those things, but then the actual action behind those things, I don't know. I've had some interesting situations. I feel like it's something that I wish there was a formula. It could be like, okay, check, check, check. But maybe it takes a little bit more trial and error.
It does, and I've done it all. So yes, I've been through lots of painful collaborations, and also I've purchased products and services with people like what you say. They talk
Hmm.
and look good cosmetically, and I've gotten really good at identifying quality of product, and I could tell that very quickly from your podcast. And it's kind of
Hmm.
funny because
That's
just the
nice
other
to say.
day, yeah, and I mean that.
Thank you.
In fact, this is the first yoga podcast I've been on, so I'm not one of those that is like a little, bopping around to anyone that'll talk to. I only want to have a valuable conversation with someone that has value.
Hmm.
In around the conversation itself, all people have value. But I was talking to the woman that is going to be my third teacher in my space, and we'd met in person once. We exchanged some emails. We met in person again with the second teacher. And then I met with her, just her to onboard her a few days ago to get her
Hmm.
onboarded. And I was talking about Little Switch Project and all these things. And at one point she said, "This is amazing. And I'm so, did you say surprised? Something like, I'm surprised and amazed I'm being invited in at this level. Like you just met me," kind of is what she was saying. And I said, Rachel, you went through a funnel. Like when you went looking for yoga in Grays Harbor and you found me, because I'm number one Google hit because I'm a little genius with SEO, by the way. But
Perfect.
when you found me, and then you read that I was non-binary and you didn't leave, and then you read that there's no fat phobia, transphobia, anti-Semitism, blah blah blah, and you didn't leave. And then when you read about the green bottle and you didn't leave, and you kept reading all my stuff, and then you got to the part where you should contact me, and you contacted me. I said, you went through like a little pachinko game. You went doot, 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 and you dropped into my
Mm.
bucket. And I don't have to have you audition. I did have to talk to her. I met with her several times, but I don't, she looked shocked when I said that, like I'd played her in some way. And I didn't say I played her specifically, but if you set up your funnel, the right people drop into your bucket. And you
Mhm.
don't need hundreds of thousands of them. The people that need 10,000 students are the people that are offering poor quality or low quality, or they're just not offering a lot, right? They
Yeah.
need to constantly find dozens, hundreds, or thousands of students. And they are the people that don't have time to talk to you one on one because of their living the hustle.
Mhm.
So I'm not saying it's inherently wrong to have larger platforms and larger audiences. I'm not saying that at all. I do believe, though, it's easier to know your ethics are really good when you stay, gosh, I don't even know the word. It's like trust your ethics. The more you trust them and the more you act on them, the more you get rewarded. It does get lonely sometimes when you're practicing some kind of ethical practice and not a lot of other people are doing it. But you only
Yes.
need to meet a handful more of them to feel a lot more encouraged. And
Mhm.
encourage, like, I hope everything I've said today encourages, especially those who are just deep diving into ethics. You can do no wrong to go deeper. It's delightful. It's kind of like you're shopping for your yoga blankets for your studio, and you're like, I did this, right? I'm like, I want to get cotton. I don't want to have polyester.
Mhm.
I'm a fiber engineer. Like I know a lot about that kind of stuff, but and I'm like, oh, it costs 3 times as much to get a cotton blanket. But you know what? That just means I go a little slower. That means that it takes me a little longer to get my
Mm.
props. Today I look in my space and I've got these beautiful props. Some of them I made myself. All of them are more ethically produced. Several of them aren't perfect. I mean, like I don't know how easy it is to get an ethically produced yoga mat. Maybe or maybe one of your, like some things are really hard. Like it's very hard to get a smartphone that's ethically produced. Like very,
Yeah,
very hard.
that's true.
So some things are harder than others. But cotton over polyester was accomplishable, and it was just like I said, 3 times as much, which just means that you don't buy as many props as quickly.
Yeah.
And I think that people get scared because they're like, I can't take that much trouble with every decision. Yes, you can. You just have to be so consistent. Don't bite off more than you can chew. That's where you'll get screwed because you'll put too much time, effort, resources, and money, and then you'll start collapsing. Like you won't show up on time. You don't write emails back. Like you have to provide a really high quality customer service. It's really
Mhm.
important to be an ethical entrepreneur.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. I appreciate that. The one thing I want to ask you that you mentioned earlier, if you feel like answering it, is you said you use the word space instead of studio.
Oh, yeah. So, first of all, you'll find that everybody wants to call it a studio, which is really interesting.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, yoga studio implies a somewhat commercial, commoditized experience. And yoga space makes people, it just disrupts them
Hmm.
a little bit. And disruption is good. You want to disrupt. If you're just being cold-blooded marketing, disruption is a niche, right? Like if you
Mhm.
say, like my space is a vegan yoga space, that's pretty niche. Like people are like, what? What do you mean? Like, how is that even relevant? Veganism has nothing to do with yoga asana, right? So use the right words for what you do. So let's say I'm trying to think of an example. Well, like your work, Billy, like and I'm really excited to come to your anti-diet workshop.
Thank you.
So grateful, and especially that you could work around my little schedule hiccup. But if you can, I know that you've got Rebel Movement. I know that you have anti-diet as part of your language. I don't know if I've seen the phrase fat liberation or not. Can't remember.
Not as much lately. I was using it a bit more. I think I go through phases of I don't think I don't think it's intentional. I think I go through, I mean, rebel movement and anti-diet are like core parts of everything. And the other language I like, but I should start using that one again because that's one of the ones that's on my list. But
Yeah, but you don't want to use too many or you become diffuse,
yeah,
right?
true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'd encourage anyone out there to really think about their words. Like for instance, I I was calling my pay what you like sliding scale. I called it pay what you
Mm.
wish. And let me tell you, I went over, should I call it pay what you can, pay what you want, pay what you wish? And I flip and agonized. And I'll tell you, once you finally pick, the next day someone will criticize your language, or
Oh
the
my
next day
gosh,
you'll wish you picked a
absolutely.
different, yeah. But if you can, don't use too many words, because if I said I'm fat liberationist, anti-racist, pro-sex work, blah, 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 blah. At a certain point, I'm just reciting a list that is the right list to recite
Yeah,
these days.
exactly. That's a good
So
point.
you can still have those languages and even promote those materials. And if you're really lovely, you'll promote other people's work and tag them. It's
Yeah.
not all coming from me, right? It's coming from other
Yeah.
people. But find the words like electric, clean, reliable, and electric are my three. And trust me, there's a million other words I wanted to pick instead. I really did really think about vegan in there. But like clean, reliable, and electric was really important to me for my community and for where I'm at. So don't pick too many words, but use the words over and over and know what they mean. So I picked space because I don't want people thinking this is like a commoditized sort of yoga grind. I want my
Hmm.
instructors to know that they're going to be treated better than they are at most other studios as far as everything. Like I treat them really beautifully. And I just, studio to me has just a connotation that is not what my business is.
Yeah.
It's not about quantity of yoga classes, that's for sure.
Yeah. I really like that. I think I might, I don't know that I necessarily am aware of how when I use studio and space, because I think I might use them interchangeably. But now that we're just, your explanation is just inspiring me to
Yeah.
be a little bit more mindful with that because you're right in how like the implications behind the word studio versus space. Like just space just feels like I can breathe a little bit like easier
It also
versus
feels like
studio.
it feels kind of open because it's literally
Yeah.
space, which is open, right? Like
Yeah,
space.
true. True.
And I'm a big word, like I have a good vocabulary, but I also like when I came up with the name Little Switch, that means a couple different things to me. I don't have to explain it. I occasionally get asked and I love to talk about it, but there's power in words. And also don't pick on yourself if you pick the wrong word. Like some people are like, "Oh, I wish I would have named it this." It's like just know that you can't change things too much or you become diffuse or you start to look
Hmm.
flaky. So you gotta be a little careful with not constantly flipping. But if someone's listening, they could say it's a yoga revolution. They could call it a yoga project. I'm coming around to the word project because it kind of implies that what implies there's a mission, and it
Hmm.
could imply all kinds of different sizes too. So I like project.
Project is a good word.
I had a yoga instructor come through my course last summer, and she was building a yoga business. And I really, I mean, your listeners are going to be like, man, Agni has a lot of information. Well, my students got like 22 hours of this kind of fire hose from me in my course, right? It was a lot.
Hmm.
But she came back to class and she said, very off the cuff, she's like, well, it's kind of like yoga for gym class dropouts. And I said, please use that language. Yoga for gym class dropouts. I
Hmm.
loved that. I instantly had a picture of what that vibe would be. So
Yeah.
everyone, and the cool thing is there's so many words. So everyone out there, you have a vibe. And by the way, you could call your project White Lady Leggings Yoga. Like you don't have to niche in the same way that I am niching or Billy.
Hmm.
You should niche to your passion and your skill set, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's important too. I
Nothing wrong with
appreciate that.
leggings.
Yeah.
I just
No,
wear
nothing.
sweatpants, not leggings.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I mean, it is one look. One thing that I mean, this is a little bit of an aside, I suppose, but um Oh no, sorry. There's a couple of things I'm tempted to tell you, but I'm trying to decide between which ones are relevant. Anyway, um, distracting myself so much. Um, oh, one thing I found, I can't believe I forgot what I was going to say. I might have to edit all that out. I have no idea what I was
No,
going to
no,
say.
keep it in. I want to say offer real quickly too, like if you called your space White Lady Leggings Yoga, you will get some push out back and some of it will be justified. But my point
Yes,
is,
true.
um, I would advise people not to try to craft what they think is palatable or marketable.
Mm,
Like,
that's a good point too.
like build the beautiful like cathedral that you already have in your heart, and trust that customers will come. That I have too many stories of success in that way. And also, those customers are not single dimensional people who only buy your product or your service. They bring so much into your life when you build, it's like a tuning fork. You build what's
Yeah,
dear.
that's the thing that um actually, like, circling back to when I was talking about I was having the imposter syndrome, and my friend gave me that advice. Um, one of the things that they said, which I think I meant to say earlier, is, I mean, I feel like it's very noticeable in this conversation that I'm not a neurotypical person. But they said that when you're making like more of a sustainable, they kept using the word sustainable. I'm sure there's other words we could use, but sustainable business in terms of like an ethical business, I suppose is a good term, might be a little bit slower to build, but the people who support you are like really there to support you, which is definitely the case. I've found that a lot. It's been a slow build, and I've, had to pivot a couple times because sometimes it takes a little bit to figure out, especially coming from if you've primarily taught at mainstream or gentrified yoga spaces, which is so many of them, and then you go in to make your own space. It takes a little bit to figure out what on earth your space is going to look like, because it took me a while before I settled into, I mean, for now I've settled into it. But the people who are there, like people who support me, people who work with me or I collaborate with, they are there to support me. They love everything I do. They tell me all the time, which is the sweetest thing
Mhm.
I could have ever asked for. And they really care because they see the work I'm doing and they see that it's not just talk, that I do work, it's within everything I do. Um, and it's just a very interesting thing to notice. And it's true that I mean, to me anyway, in my experience, the ethical business takes a little bit of time, but the people who support you are like, you get pretty
Yeah,
lucky with people who support you.
and also everyone needs to be clear that every business, there's three ways to start a business. One is you save up your little nickels and dimes, you have cash, you have liquid asset, like, and you buy your supplies, your marketing. You have a bunch of money ahead of time, and a bunch could mean 1,000 or whatever. Like I started Little Switch with 1,000 or whatever. The second is that you work from nothing, like I got nothing and I'm just hanging my little shingle. It's pretty risky, but I've done that too. And the third is that you borrow money. There is no fourth option. There's no fourth way to start a business. So don't ever think that, like, if you're like, man, I'm not making much or things are going slow, the bakery down the street that had a big shiny sign and like looks super posh, they borrowed a shitload of money to
Mm.
put that together. So when you've got your shitty little curtains and you can tell when I get really excited because my language gets foul.
I like
Um,
it.
but when you've got your shabby little situation and your mats are borrowed, or man, just remember you didn't capitalize, you didn't get a loan. You did,
Mm.
another insidious part of capitalism is that we associate polish with merit. And that's why I say I don't look for polish anymore, because some of the most polished people got my money and gave me little value. So I don't look for
Oh, I
polished.
love
And
that.
I'm not very polished, although I'm proud of my websites and I do a good job with them and my marketing, but I'm not a polished person. The other thing I wanted to say, you were talking about your people that support you really support you. Yes, they do. They don't always support you meaningfully enough for you to survive. And that's why you have to kind of tell them that they got to put a little skin in the game. There's all kinds of ways to tell them. There's gentle ways, there's very plain speaking ways. But one thing I will say is they will appreciate you because people want to believe it's possible to be ethical in today's world. They actually
Mhm.
want to believe that. And a bunch of people live lives and make choices that they don't actually feel very good about. And when they see somebody who holds themselves to a standard and achieves it mostly, and holds themselves to a standard even when it's hard, they really appreciate that. So whether or not they give you the money or share your stuff or help you enough is another question, but they will appreciate you. And that's why being reliable and ethical is more important than I think we realize. Because I have had so many opportunities come my way because of my ethics and my reputation. So many.
Mhm.
And as Thich Nhat Hanh said, my actions are the only ground I stand upon. So we can sit there and say, oh, life's hard and I have to buy from Amazon. I have to do this. And there's all these things I have to do to survive. Sure, fine. But where can you apply ethics and hold yourself to a higher standard? And that is a freedom that Viktor Frankl says, right, that we all have. And you got to be careful because capitalism will make you feeling like you're a victim. And in a sense, we all are. But in another sense, we are not helpless. And
Mhm.
the 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 voluntary helplessness that some people opt into, as far as like, why should I support this? I can't afford to. It's like you can't afford to take 30 seconds and reshare about Billy's workshop. Like, well, I don't have the capacity. Okay, you don't have the capacity today. That's fine. Like, do you want to have that capacity? Like, no, I don't. Okay, well, at this point, it sounds like you're in a really dark spot. Good luck. Like, I really hope you find
Mhm.
something. But for me, in my hardest times, my ethics were the only things I had to hold on to. Sometimes I stopped short of them. Sometimes I did not, you know, meet them. But I still am glad that I never let go because when I got a little stronger, I was able to make a better decision. So
Mhm.
ultimately, you end up getting a lot more self compassion when you're an ethical person. But maybe not at first. You kind of beat yourself up. I didn't do it perfect. It's like, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not about, I mean, one of the things that I think comes up through diet culture, people are healing from diet culture, is that that diet culture has taught us is that like striving for perfect rather than it being a practice um, can come up when you are, in just in the healing process from eating disorder or disordered movement or whatever, where you're like you're doing all these things and then it's one wrong move or like you whatever some in quotes, which obviously you can't see because you're listening to the podcast, but quotes hiccup or mistake or you trying a different pair of pants and it can feel like, oh, none of the other actions I've ever made
Yeah.
matter because of this moment. Everything is back and it's hard again. Um, where I can feel like the no pain, no gain thing. It's like it's a message in different wordings that's telling us that perfect is the only option, but
Mhm.
it's not the case because in some cases, like maybe you're a teacher or you're starting a business or whatever, and you want to be ethical in like X, Y, Z ways, but you have no money, like you're starting off with nothing. Like, okay, what of the options you have, like what is the most ethical? Or like where, like you were saying, like what can you do um that is in line with your ethics? And as you build or your capacity builds or your finances build, like then, making that
Yeah.
decision there.
I don't feel ashamed when I can't commit a perfect action. And I've been thinking about this a lot lately because other people, that shame holds them back, or guilt, or both.
Hmm.
They just don't even bother because they just
Yeah.
feel like the inertia is too great. And I've thought about this a lot because I'm like, am I just more resilient than other people, or did I get there through my intense struggles? Which I love to talk about my failures. But one thing I will say is just remember that when you feel helpless, just remember, who does that benefit? Like, not like, don't think about yourself for a minute. Think, who does that benefit when I feel too helpless to make a better choice?
Hmm.
And his name's Jeff Bezos, his name's Elon Musk. Like, those are the people. So maybe that will galvanize people to love themselves a bit more. For some of us, we need to seek outside help. It's just some of us need medicine. Like there's no, one size fits all.
For sure.
But cling to that time that you stuck to your principles. If it's you
Mhm.
got one memory, everyone's got one. When you have two memories, you still think it's a fluke. There comes a point when you're like, I am this kind of person now, and no one can take that away from you. And it's almost the only thing you can really have. Like someone could take away my house, my health, my life tomorrow, but they can't take away my actions that I've done. So
Mhm.
I just find that incredibly
I love
empowering. And
that.
yeah, it doesn't matter how terrible I feel or I still have that. And you can't get it without doing hard work. You cannot
Yeah.
purchase this thing.
Yeah. I love
But
that. That's inspiring.
when you hear people say no ethical consumption under capitalism, that's very true. But if people say that in order to justify not making better decisions, then they're very pro-capitalism at that point. They're
Mm,
saying, I won't try because somebody else, I have it harder than somebody else, so I don't have to ever make myself uncomfortable. It's like, well, someone has it harder than you and you're kind of got your foot on their neck. But so, yes, there is no ethical consumption under capitalism. That's quite liberating because it doesn't mean we have to be perfect. But
yeah.
the interesting thing is, it's like if someone told me tomorrow, hey, there is an ethical smartphone and it's $2,000. I wouldn't say, I can't afford that. I would say, okay, who makes it? Tell me more. Is there a payment plan? I'm not even saying I'd buy it. I'd say that's where my mind goes with ethics is tell me
Mhm.
more, not I can't deal with hearing this. Like I can't be perfect. Don't tell me this.
Mhm.
I'm super
Mhm.
stressed. So something changed within me where I started feeling excited about ethics instead of bludgeoned by them.
For
So I
sure.
hope that my attitude catches on because it's
Yeah.
very wonderful way to live.
Yeah, for sure. I think this episode will be really helpful for that as well. Do you have any other thoughts on resisting gentrification that you would like to share before we?
Yeah, I guess I wanted to like specifically talk about how gentrification has affected my yoga project.
Yeah, please do.
Three main things. First of all, is I pay a really high rent. So I have a really cool space and I pay a rent that is more than 50% of my revenues. And that makes me a tiny bit uncomfortable because, like, mathematically, you're supposed to sort of do 25 to 30, right? So because I have a pricing equity model, I don't make as much revenue as I could, but I'm renting a really nice space. But I want my space to be really nice because I want people who pay $0 because they don't, I want them to walk into a nice space, not a grubby floor somewhere. Grubby floor yoga is totally valid and awesome, but I really specifically wanted there to be like, you have a posh yoga space, even if you can't pay. You deserve just as nice a thing as anyone else.
Mm,
What I also noticed is there is a haves and haves not mentality with people that do have resources. I had a community leader. She has a business, and I bought something from her business for my yoga space. And we had a little chit chat, and she said, "Well, there've always been haves and have-nots. That's how it is, and the haves give to the have-nots." Resist that. That is gentrification right there. It is like the have-nots are over there. Gentrification, we want mixed experiences. We want there to be all kinds of different people in our neighborhoods and in our businesses. So resist that idea of there's sort of people that hang out in different places. And on that note, I have discovered that different socioeconomic classes don't like to mix, and that comes from all sides. That isn't just top down. Like there is like a discomfort of like, I don't want to be next to that person because we are of a different socioeconomic class. So just be aware. I would say that that is one of the tragic, but also think of how much power you have as a yoga leader to let people start to know that it's safe to mix with one another. Like that is, if you look up how to resist gentrifications, one of the first things besides all of these policies and housing issues, they'll say is get people to talk to one another. So as a yoga leader, if you are smart or find someone who can help you build your little project, you have more power than you realize. And there's one other thing I wanted to say related to you
yeah,
talking
yeah.
about, you were saying we've all been exposed to kind of mainstream American yoga, most of your listeners, right? Or Canadian yoga. And so then when you're building your own thing, you kind of don't realize just how much you can lean into your quirks and your passions. That is so true because I'm a very experienced entrepreneur. And the other, like it was like a week ago, I was like, God, I really want to have a vegan class, but people won't be happy to hear that. And I was like, wait, I'm the fucking boss. I was like, what? Like even I know that, but I was like, no, Agni, if you make it, people will come, and the people who are disgruntled will, because of your reputation, they'll soften towards veganism. Like there's no downside, but I had that moment of like, what if people don't like it? I'm like, I'm the boss. I am the boss, right? So
Mm-hmm.
everyone listening, you really are the boss, and like lean into your stuff. If you're like, I'm a bit witchy, or I like to crochet, or all those things, put that in your yoga space. You don't have
Mm-hmm.
to provide a sort of palatable, marketable thing. You provide a passionate thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that was my little soapbox on that.
Yeah, I love that. I had a similar thing where I was having like that when I first started to branch out to do my own, really my own style and my own approach to business and yoga movement. Um, I had that too feeling too, where like, oh, I wish I could do this. Like, wait a minute, I'm the boss.
Yes.
I can do that. I can do this. And it's a very weird um feeling. And I think as a person who is, if I'm supporting businesses or going into a space, I feel like I'm much more likely to buy from someone who's like, I don't know, really loves I can't remember the examples you just gave. Crochet. No, is that the one you gave? Crochet?
Yeah, crochet, which being a witch.
Witchy.
Yeah,
Like
we
if they're
like that
like super open
confidence,
about
right?
it. Yeah. Even
Yeah,
if they don't, even if I'm not into it, like into those specific interests, the fact that they're like showing up as a human being, I'm like, hey,
yeah,
this is the place where I'm going to feel more comfortable versus someone who's putting this like perfected version of what they think people want to see. Like, I want to see you. I don't care what people, I don't
absolutely. And
care
we
about
want to
the fake
see.
stuff.
Yeah, I was in a college art class a couple of years ago because there was COVID money for it, and the instructor kind of criticized one of the young women in class and said, "You keep putting eyes, like human eyes, like you keep putting those motifs, and maybe you should like try a new motif." And I was like, "Dude, you are a professional, degreed artist, and I respect that." But I also think artists should dick around with whatever they want to until they're done. Like my one tattoo, well, I have two now, is a pizza slice because I was stitching pizza slices in everything because I'm obsessed with the pizza slice iconography. And it's like, I'm going to do that not until Billy's tired of it or these people are tired of it, but until I am tired of it. And
Yeah.
like, do your thing because you make such a quality business or project when you do exactly what you want. And
Hmm.
when you jump around trying to make people happy, you get very diffuse very fast. So be
Yeah.
careful with that.
Yeah,
Plus, you and I
absolutely.
know that if you say what times the yoga classes works for you, the very people who say definitely Wednesday 8 a.m. I will be there for sure. There's 100% correlative that they don't show. So you have to be really careful
Yes.
about polling people and doing what they want because a bunch
Yeah.
of them are just happy to tell you and they
Oh
won't
my
put a
gosh.
dime. Yeah.
Yeah.
We could have a whole
So
episode on that.
we could, I with 1,000%. So much of the stuff you talked about today, I feel like, or that we've talked about, I guess, I feel like I've learned the hard way through the last few years. Um, that like polling or making decisions like how you do your business and like I don't know that I don't know if I had the perspective to think about it then, but when I started to do my own thing and be, I guess, like going against the grain in terms of my approach with business or marketing and classes and whatever, all the things, there definitely were voices that like people who didn't like it and people who, when I spoke about social justice issues, who also didn't like it. There's always going to be people who don't like it. And I mean, hopefully you can have compassionate conversations depending on how what they're actually saying. Um, and I'm taking a guess that it like relating it to the episode as well in terms of resisting gentrification. If you're taking these steps, if say you're implementing the sliding scale or you're changing the way that you're speaking about your business or speaking about people, there's always going to be people who don't like it. And um, also, you might look back at the decisions you've made or how you've approached it or whatever and be like, oh, I definitely learned that the hard way. Even though I listened to this episode and I still did all the things, like it's, you would have to learn on your own.
Dude,
But
there's anytime you resist capitalism in a substantive way, not just a performative way, you
mhm,
do experience hardship. That said, it's harder to just go along with it because it hurts your heart. To
yeah,
not take action when you know that you should, or to take action that you know is harmful.
that's a good point.
And so, I really believe in everyone listening that you don't have to be afraid to do that and to put yourself in discomfort.
Hmm.
And on that note, like when I have some notes and I'll send them on if you
Cool.
want to post them. But with the green bottle exercise, I would encourage listeners to use the planet calculator as well. So in the planet calculator, you talk about your life, like what kind of car you drive, what kind of house you live in, what kind of food you eat, and you get a number as to how many planets it would take to sustain. If everyone on the planet lived the way you did, how many planets would it take to sustain your life? Because Americans use up something like 26% of the world's resources, and we're about 5% of the population. I bet Canadians are real similar as far
Probably.
as we overconsume. Americans buy twice as many clothes as second place on the planet, and we throw out twice as many as second place.
Wow.
And so I'm not saying this to shame people. I'm saying us to get into reality because there is one planet that we live on.
Yeah.
Um, and so we should think about our resources and we should feel really comfortable picking that $0 yoga amount for your yoga school or your class. We should absolutely, but we should also look at what the planet has to do to let us live.
Hmm.
And it's funny because my partner and I will have these long walks every night and I'll be spouting all these statistics. Like I just took a course on animal agribusiness and its costs on the environment, eating animals and their secretions. And I'm talking, and my partner said, I'm getting really stressed out. And I was like, I said, that's so funny because the more I get educated on ethics, the more calm I feel because I
Mm.
finally know answers to things I already suspected. It's like, I've always thought this was a little fucked up. And then you learn like the facts. My blood pressure goes down, but he was getting activated. And so anyone listening this episode and its implications might feel really stressful actually. So please do take care of yourself and only stick your toe in like after you've had a nap and a snack if you want to do that
Yeah.
planet calculator. Like take care of yourself because the intention on talking about ethics is not to shame, it's to empower and to
Hmm.
encourage, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's an important thing um to address too, that like your capacity to maybe do those calculators or whatever, like your every person's individual history, and like what they've got going on. There's like it's a whole long list, and it's so unique. And some things might be triggering or difficult, or um, and it's okay if you're not in a space yet where you can do any of that. And also, it's okay if some of the decisions you've made, you have to make are, maybe I'll just give an example if that's okay.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know how many years ago now. I was vegan and vegetarian for a long time. And for myself, it was very, 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 very extremely connected to my eating disorder.
Mm.
Um, Although it was masquerading as the ethical decision, it was very, very connected to that. And also, I have a million allergies. Not literally a million, but a lot of them. And I got to a point where I started to actually be pretty unwell. And I was really stuck between the ethical decision and the decision that was for my personal well-being, emotional, physical. And it feels really impossible sometimes in that kind of situation where you're like, what do I do? But I think one of the things that helped me, and I'm not trying to say this in any way, like, don't be vegan, vegetarian, just to address if anyone's like stuck in that, like, what do I do? I don't have the, I don't, whatever. Um, one of the things that helped me is that if I'm spending all my energy, say, protesting and doing all of these things, and my cup is completely empty all the time, and I'm giving and giving and giving and not doing anything that's like I'm not eating enough, or I'm not sleeping enough, or I'm not grounding, and I'm stressed out all the time, you're going to burn out, and you're not going to be able to continue that. But if you can make some decisions, whether they're small, it's like have a nap, or it's like have a snack, or whatever, that fill your cup. I know that's a kind of an overused phrase, but like that are almost like investing in your well-being. It's easier to have more ethical change in the long run, sustainable change, and your approach might change as well over time. Like maybe when I started, then it had to be like, okay, I can't keep being, in this case, couldn't keep being vegan vegetarian because I was getting really sick and I needed to do allergy testing and whatever. But then as time goes, like maybe that means that now I'm eating less meat, or I'm, buying from local, or like whatever, your approach can change as it goes. There's not one right, one wrong. Um, just in case it's over. Like I just found it in that particular situation. It's very overwhelming because I really didn't know what to do. And I was a little bit like it's hard sometimes to be stuck in that position. So just in case that's helpful
Yeah, I mean, and
to
I'd
name.
make two comments on that too, because like the first time I went vegan specifically was 1990. I was 13 here in Grays Harbor. We didn't even have tofu in the supermarket, and I had a really unsupportive family, and so of course I fell out of it. And for years, my heart like hurt, and I would go in and out of vegan, vegetarian, omnivore, and all that. And when I finally recommitted to veganism, I looked at what I didn't have the first time around. And I was like, oh, I
Hmm.
had no support, right? So I did a bunch of things to get myself support. I also didn't have an education on how to stay well and all that. So that's one piece, is kind of like put a pin in it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, say,
Yeah.
Amazon's another good one, right? I have a friend who well, I had a friend who didn't buy any fast fashion. She either made it, thrifted it, or bought it from an ethical maker. And I told her almost on a daily basis, I'm like, Amanda, you are MVP, because so few people take garment worker rights seriously and take
Hmm.
planet justice seriously. So, if you're like, I just can't anymore. I have to buy off Amazon, or, I don't have to, but like, I just, life's overwhelming. At least put a pin in the issue and revisit it in a serious way later, instead
Yeah.
of constantly sort of saying, well, I can't do this, I can't do that, I can't. And the other thing you were saying, or the other thing I thought of is, you are so right that it's important not to burn out, because when we burn out, we get very self-absorbed, right? I'm doing
Hmm.
all of this is happening. I can't do anything right. I can't do anything right. Wait, who are you talking about? Me, 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 me. So self-absorption happens when we burn ourselves out. And so it's kind of counterintuitive, because it's like I need to really have as high a quality of life as I can, so that I'm not always thinking about myself and my troubles. So quality of life is about a lot of things. It might mean cleaning your kitchen once a month because you just need that. Or it might
Hmm.
mean asking someone else to clean your kitchen. Or it might mean giving yourself a break. I've never been good at that. I don't know if you could tell from this guy, I don't give myself a break. But I do think that giving yourself a break is incredibly useful. And the ways that I do it, I'm one of those people that I get up at 7 in the morning and I'm working and studying until 10:30 at night, and I'll say, Agni, this is no longer reasonable to keep working, and then I can let myself relax and watch some trash, horror film. So I do think that we should try to avoid burnout if possible, and
Hmm.
sometimes it's not possible, but because if nothing else, you will become entirely self-absorbed if you're burnt out, and it's counterintuitive, but it's true. And I also think there's so many problems that you can't fix them all, so be careful that you don't try to. Like, right?
Yeah, that's an important thing too. Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
it's kind of a weird grandiosity. It's like, I got to do everything right. It's like, well, that's impossible. And are you sure you got to do everything right? Because it's not, like, you're just going to burn out. So,
Yeah.
and also, please do support other people. One thing about capitalism is people get so passive and they don't support quality work. So, I reshared about your class that's coming up and tagged you and stuff like
Hmm.
that. Like, I can't do
Thank
that
you.
for everybody. I'm busy, like we all are.
Hmm.
But remember, if you can't do a piece of the work, please do meaningfully support somebody who is doing that. And that could just be resharing on socials. That is, trust me, not enough people reshare ethic projects on
Mhm.
socials, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah. Thank you so much for your time. I know that we have
It's been fun.
I have you coming back soon. I mean, we're for a couple other episodes, right?
Yes, I'm
Um,
looking forward to it.
yeah, me too. And it'll be a surprise for anyone listening. You just have to wait and see. I'm not going to give anything away. Where can people find you? Is there anything else that you want to plug before we head out?
I guess I want to say there was something and I can't remember what it was. I wanted to say I do provide mentorship for ethical entrepreneurs. So this is essentially like my course, but it's one-on-one. And I do offer sliding scale and payment plans. So if you're interested in that, you can reach out through my Gmail, which is just agnihogaboom@gmail.com. And there was some other resource I wanted to share that had nothing to do with me, and it was something else, but now I can't remember. I'm very approachable. I'm not on socials as much as I used to be, but if anyone finds me on Instagram at Agni Hogaboom or at Little Switch Yoga and you DM, I'm delighted and I will always respond as long as I see the message. And I just also, if anyone out there needs support for their project, if anyone out there is like, hey, I'm doing this, yoga for disability workshop, just tag me in and I will reshare. If I take a look and it looks legit, I will absolutely reshare that. I really strongly believe in resharing voices of people doing quality work. And I
Mhm.
really appreciate what you're doing, Billy, because
Thank you.
there's so many yoga podcasts that are, I don't know, it's not very substantive. So this has really been a treat.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I really like how I really, it's been really fun having a kind of a more broad, it's not super extremely narrowed down, um, but it all still really connects to rebel movement. And it's been pretty great for me because I've got to have a lot of cool conversations.
Mhm.
It feels way more fun. It was more a decision based on can I sustain keeping it very specific? Probably not, which has been pretty helpful. I appreciate you and your time and your work. All of your work is interesting, and I'm excited for further conversations. I'll make sure to put for anyone listening, if you were like driving or whatever and you didn't catch that, I'll put the email below and everything else. If you don't see what you're looking for in the show notes, just send either of us a message and I'm sure we'd be happy to send it along. If you do have any questions or feedback, um, talking points, anything like that, you can send them to info@movewithbilly.com and I will make sure to send them along or bring them up in the next episode with like in our next episode. And I think that's everything. Thank you so much for being here. Oh, right. You can follow me at Move with Billy. I used to forget this every single time. On all the socials, but you're gonna probably find me better on Instagram. You can use that email and check out my website, movewithbilly.com. And thank you so much for being here. I really do appreciate your time. This has been really a great conversation, and I appreciate you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Billy.
Bye.
You so much for listening. I loved that conversation. I love all of these conversations. All the links should be in the show notes. If you have any trouble finding them, just send me a message on Instagram and I can send them to you directly. If you have any feedback for me or for either of us, any questions, anything like that, send them to info@movewithbilly.com. If you're interested in being a guest on the podcast or you have questions, topic ideas, something you'd like me to talk about, no matter how taboo it is, send them in to me. Either Instagram or email is fine. Social media is at Move with Billy. And just for clarity's sake, it's BILLIE. Though I'm sure if you're here, you probably already know that. So thanks so much. I will see you next week. And I really hope you have a fantastic week.